It's one of the most recognised buildings in London. Although today's cathedral by Sir Christopher Wren only dates back some 300 years, a church dedicated to St Paul has stood on this site for more than 1400 years. The cathedral is a global tourist attraction that welcomes up to 5,000 visitors every day. But primarily St Paul's is a working church with hourly prayer and daily services. I spoke with the current Dean of St Paul's, the Very Rev David Ison, to find out a bit more about the role of the cathedral today.
St Paul's seeks to enable people in all their diversity to encounter the transforming presence of God in Jesus Christ. And that's what we see that we're for. So all the things that we do and the activities that we do, the fact that people come to us as a heritage building to see this wonderful architecture, what we're trying to do is to give them an encounter of the spiritual purpose of the building. It was built for the glory of God. It's big and awesome because it's trying to represent a God who's so much bigger than us. And what we hope is that people don't just come and say, oh, here's some nice architecture by Christopher Wren, but they come and say, wow, this is a place that takes your breath away, and what's it all about? So that we can talk to them more about our Christian faith. St Paul's is a church which has lots of different strands to it. It's more complicated than most churches because you're talking about, for a small number of people, it's their local church. But it's a very small number in St Paul's compared to other churches. You're talking about a church which is at the heart of the City of London, so people in the city relate to it as their church, even though there are 30 or more little churches within the city. It's a church for the diocese which covers the north and west of the City of London. It doesn't cover the whole of London by any means, but it's the church that people look to from their own local parishes. So when we have big celebrations for the diocese, they're in the cathedral here and the bishop will lead those. But it's also a church with a national profile because it's the biggest church in London. It's right in the middle. It's something where state events take place from time to time, and it has that international profile.
In October 2011, St Paul's found itself at the centre of much media attention as Occupy London protesters challenging economic inequality set up their camp right next to the cathedral. Disagreements over how to address the encampment led to the resignation of some cathedral staff, including its dean at the time, Bishop Graham Knowles.
The life of the cathedral was affected in terms of its day-by-day operation, and it was pretty stressful for the staff who were here, having to deal with the practical as well as the emotional problems of having a lot of people with a particular agenda and some with a very disturbed lifestyle and some very extreme views and behaviours to deal with. That said, the camp having moved on and having addressed some of those issues with the staff, there's a bigger question that it's left the cathedral with, which is what is the purpose of the cathedral in relation to these things? And that's one of the reasons why we spent the first year of my time here looking at what are we for. And one of the things we stand for is for justice in the world and for the dignity of every person. And we have what's called the St Paul's Institute, which is our social engagement arm, if you like, which over the last 5 years or so has been specialising in the area of finance and financial ethics. What we do with that is to do not just lectures, but also to do seminars with people and bringing them in to say, well, what's going on in your area? How can we help you develop? So, for example, we had Al Gore, the former vice president, who came and addressed a group of Christian investors, about 40 or 50 different institutions with about £12 billion a year to invest, on how you could do ethical and sustainable investment. In terms of the arts, we've had a history of engaging in performance, whether it's music or we've had ballet and dance here. We're also doing exhibitions of one sort or another. We had 26 donkeys from Egypt who were here at the beginning of September 2013, and they were here partly for interfaith reasons, because they were by Christian and Muslim artists, partly also to increase awareness about the need for peace with what's been going on in the Middle East in general and Egypt in particular. At the moment we have a statue, a bronze statue by Nicola Hicks called Sorry, Sorry, Sarajevo, which is a man carrying a dead body in his arms, which is a reminder about the folly and loss of war, with particular reference to the Balkan conflict. But of course it also reminds us of the forthcoming anniversary of 100 years ago, the outbreak of the First World War. So we're trying to look at ways that we can use art that make people think about life, about God, about their own lives, and how we make sense of it all. Back in, must have been about 603 AD, back in Rome, in the monastery of St. Gregory. Gregory the Great, who was the Pope at the time, sent out a second wave of missionaries to England to follow St. Augustine, who founded Canterbury Cathedral. And one of those was a man called Mellitus, and he came to be the bishop to the East Saxons, which was covering the area north of the Thames, of which London was the centre. And Mellitus came here in 604 and built the first cathedral in London, and it went up and down a bit. There was some paganism that came back. It was refounded by a bishop called Erkenwald later in the 600s. And the cathedral has continued since. We think it's probably the fifth building, Christopher Wren's building, so it's only been there 300 years. It's quite a junior one, really. But the cathedral before that, when it was built by the Normans in 1087 onwards, was the biggest cathedral building in Northern Europe, and the spire was the tallest in the Christian world at 520 feet high. So it was a big place. It's always been a big church since the Normans came, and it's making that statement. Look, it's a bit like the big skyscrapers you get in London. Here we are, and this is a place where you have to take notice of the fact that this is a big God that we're taking into account. So it was built by people for all kinds of reasons, I guess. It was used in all sorts of ways. There was a road that ran through the middle of it that people used to walk up and down carrying meat to and from the market just over the road. It was used as a bookshop. It was used as a place to do business, because it would have been the one big public building with a roof on it that people could come and use. The nice thing is when people come to the cathedral in St. Paul's, we can welcome them to say, well, we've been singing and saying evening prayer on this site for 1400 years. And the words of the service you're about to hear are the same words that we've been using for over 450 years. And the dome is used in all kinds of ways. That shot of the dome, whether it's the iconic picture of the dome surrounded in smoke as the Blitz rages in 1940, whether it's pictures of the finance world where you get the dome of St. Paul's next to the logo of a bank, whether it's a sign of London, because it's one of the things that people instantly recognise as being from London. There are all sorts of ways it's used, but on top of the dome there is a cross. Sometimes people notice it, sometimes the pictures cut it out. But it says, actually, this dome, this sign, is a sign of a Christian church. And if there's anything that we could do by the end of my time here, if we can get at least some people to think, that's a Christian building, and inside there and outside from it, there are all sorts of interesting things happening which are about faith in the God that we know through Jesus Christ, and I'd like to be part of that, then I think we'll have achieved something of what we're setting out to do.
For Episcopal News Service, I'm Matthew Davies.